Hi, I'm Steve Koski, host of Cruisin with Papa Steve, where we explore California's East Bay on my Honda Rebel 1100. Let's go cruisin'.
The 1991 Oakland Hills Firestorm ignited a half mile from the northern end of Skyline Boulevard. The steep East Bay mountainside overlooking the San Francisco Bay, Berkeley, and Oakland burned for 3 days before the firefighting force equal to a 107 alarm fire snuffed it out. Before the flames were extinguished, the fire killed 25 people and injured 150 others. The fire destroyed 2,843 homes, along with 437 apartments and condominiums. Flames burned 1,520 acres along the densely populated edges of Oakland and Berkeley. Economic loss was estimated at $1.5 billion. In 2021 money, that would be equal to $3 billion. The fire started Saturday, October 19, from an incompletely extinguished grass fire, a half mile north of the Caldecott Tunnel in the Berkeley Hills, northeast of the intersection of California State Routes 24 and 13. Caldecott Tunnel is the main passage for traffic to and from Oakland and the eastern coastal areas of the San Francisco Bay, and the valleys on the inland side of the coastal mountain range. Skyline Boulevard crosses over the Caldecott Tunnel farther up the mountainside. Firefighters fought the original 5-acre blaze on the steep hillside, and by Saturday night they thought the grass fire was under control. However, shortly before 11 a.m. Sunday, driven by winds gusting to 65 miles per hour, the fire reignited, then rapidly spread southwest. The flames overwhelmed local and regional firefighting resources. By 11:30 a.m., the fire had spread to the Parkwoods apartments located next to the Caldecott Tunnel. By noon, the fire had blown up to the top of Hiller Highlands to the west. From there, flames swept down to the Hiller Highlands development in the southern hills of Berkeley. Torrid winds blew embers from burning houses and vegetation ahead of the flames, starting new blazes. Within 30 minutes, the fire had crossed Highway 13, a 4-lane freeway, and Highway 24, an 8-lane freeway. After that, the firestorm razed hundreds of houses in the Forest Park neighborhood on the northwest edge of the Montclair district and in the Upper Rock Ridge neighborhood. Today, we're cruising Skyline Boulevard. Evidence of the firestorm is gone, but the memories have not. The razed homes, apartments, and condominiums have been rebuilt, but every summer, herds of hundreds of goats fan out to graze down the grasses on the vertical sides of the mountain to reduce the threat of another fire. The grazing goats serve 3 purposes. They reduce the fire danger from dry grass, their hooves aerate the soil, and their poop acts as fertilizer. Skyline Boulevard meanders for 21 miles along the coastal mountain ridge that borders the eastern edge of Oakland. The road is difficult to characterize. In places, the boulevard is just a 2-lane blacktop, while other parts are a true 4-lane boulevard, replete with tastefully landscaped medians. Motorcycle enthusiasts cruise the parts of the boulevard with twisties, although other long stretches of the road are casually straight. Portions of Skyline Boulevard cut through middle and upper-class residential neighborhoods, while undeveloped parts of the route cross nature preserves and public parks. At various points along the boulevard, eye-wooing panoramas of San Francisco Bay pan into view, then pan out again. Oakland is never far away. With a population of 440,000, Oakland is the 8th largest city in California and the 45th largest city in the United States. It's about half the size of San Francisco. Both cities have maritime ports, however the Port of Oakland is the 5th busiest seaport in the United States. Oakland's renown exceeds the size of its population. The city became the western terminal of the world's first transcontinental railroad, the Pacific Railway, which opened in 1869. Transcontinental is an exaggeration. The tracks connected Oakland with Omaha, Nebraska, only halfway across the continent. Even so, they stretched for 1,928 miles. For $65, a passenger could board the train in Omaha and a week later stretch out their cramped limbs, dust off their soiled clothing, and disembark in Oakland, a ferry ride across the bay from booming San Francisco. The Pacific Railway's original course was very close to current Interstate 80. One of the earliest charters of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club was founded in Oakland in 1957. The city is the birthplace of Kamala Harris, Vice President of the United States. She was born October 20, 1964. In October 1966, Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale founded the Black Panther Party. Newton and Seale met in 1962 when they were both community college students at Merritt College. They founded the organization to encourage black Oakland residents to carry guns to protect themselves from police violence. The professional team, now known as the Las Vegas Raiders, played in Oakland from the team's founding as the 8th franchise of the American Football League in 1960. The team left Oakland in 1981 to play in Los Angeles. Then the Raiders returned to Oakland in 1995 before relocating to Las Vegas in 2019. The Golden State Warriors of the National Basketball Association played in Oakland from 1971 to 2019 before moving to San Francisco for the 2019-2020 season. The Oakland Athletics is one of the American League's 8 charter franchises. The team moved from Kansas City to Oakland in 1968. The Athletics won 9 World Series championships since the club was founded in Philadelphia in 1901. It won 3 consecutive World Series after moving to Oakland in 1972, 1973, and 1974. Oakland's territory covers what was once a mosaic of California coastal terrace prairie, oak woodland, and north coastal scrub. The earliest known inhabitants were the Bay Miwok tribe, which lived in the Bay Area for thousands of years. The Bay Miwok language belonged to a linguistic grouping later called the Ohlone. Ilona is a Miwok word meaning Western people. The forest-dwelling, teddy bear-like humanoids called Ewoks that debuted in the 1983 Star Wars film Return of the Jedi are ostensibly named after the Miwok. According to local lore, the container cranes at the port of Oakland inspired the At-At walkers from Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. The lands that became Oakland were colonized by Spanish settlers in 1772 for King Charles III of Spain. In the early 19th century, the Spanish crown granted the East Bay area to Luis Maria Peralta for his Rancho San Antonio. The grant was confirmed by the Mexican Republic after Spain granted Mexico independence. Before Luis Peralta's death in 1842, Peralta divided his lands among his 4 sons. Most of Oakland was within the parcels given to Antonio Maria and Vicenta. The portion of the land that is now Oakland was called Encinar because of the large oak forest that covered the area. Encinar is Spanish for oak grove. The oak forest is the source of the city's name. Oakland's pre-urban lands, swaddled with oak and redwood, were logged to build San Francisco. The fertile flatland soils became the foundation for a prolific agricultural region. The Peralta family struggled to keep their lands, however, after California became 31st state. One history of the period says the family was the victim of ethnic violence. Squatters cut down their fruit trees, killed their cattle, destroyed their buildings, and even fenced off the roads leading to the rancho. The same historical account accuses lawyer Horace Carpentier of tricking Vincent Peralta into signing a lease that turned out to be a mortgage against the 19,000-acre rancho. The lands became Carpentier's when Peralta refused to repay the fraudulent loan. The Peraltas were forced to abandon the home site they had occupied for 2 generations. During the 1850s, just as gold was discovered in California, Oakland started growing because land was becoming too expensive in San Francisco. Carpentier became the first mayor of Oakland in 1854. He was ousted in 1855 by angry citizens when they discovered he had persuaded the town's trustees to pass an ordinance that gave him complete, lucrative control over Oakland's waterfront. The Chinese began migrating to Oakland during the 1850s as well. People in China were struggling financially because of the Opium Wars and the Taiping Rebellion. Many Chinese laborers were recruited to build railroads. Oakland is the location of one of the earliest Chinatowns on the West Coast. However, the Chinese struggled because they were discriminated against by the white community, and their living quarters were burned down on several occasions. Following the 1906 San Francisco earthquake, many displaced San Francisco residents moved to Oakland, further enlarging the population, increasing its housing stock, and improving its infrastructure. Fires caused by the earthquake burned down San Francisco's Chinatown, so many San Francisco Chinese also moved to Oakland. The city continued to grow during the 20th century with its busy port, shipyards, and a thriving automobile manufacturing industry. The Fagel Motor Company chose East Oakland for its first factory in 1916. The company manufactured farming tractors from 1918 to 1923. 1923. Fagel expanded to trucks, buses, and trains later. General Motors opened an automobile factory in 1917 in East Oakland. The factory produced Chevrolet cars and then GMC trucks until 1963, when the company moved the plant to Fremont in southern Alameda County. By 1920, Oakland was the home of numerous manufacturing industries, including metals, canneries, bakeries, internal combustion engines, automobiles, and shipbuilding. Chrysler expanded with a new Oakland plant in 1929. The city became known as the Detroit of the West. The automotive and much of the other manufacturing has left Oakland. However, a number of national and international firms still call Oakland home. They include Armor All, Ask.com, Clorox, Glad, Kaiser Permanente, Neiman Ranch, and Pandora Radio. Oakland was one of the hardest hit California cities to be afflicted by plague in the early decades of the 1900s. Oakland ports required arriving vessels to be inspected for infected rats. Port authorities scrutinized more than 1,000 vessels per year for plague and yellow fever. More than 5,000 people were quarantined by 1908. Health officials dispatched hunters to poison rats and to shoot squirrels in affected areas. A brief epidemic of pneumonic plague killed a dozen people in Oakland in 1919. The disease spread after a hunter in Contra Costa Valley killed and ate a squirrel. He fell ill 4 days later, and then another household member contracted the plague, which spread from there. The 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake rumbled October 17, south of Oakland in the East Bay, along California's central coast. The magnitude 6.9 trembler killed 42 people in Oakland when the upper deck of the Cypress Street Viaduct collapsed onto Interstate 880, crushing cars beneath it and causing crashes on the upper deck. Skyline Boulevard connects Robert Sibley Volcanic Regional Preserve, Redwood Regional Park, Chabot Space and Science Center, and Anthony Chabot Regional Park. Sibley Volcanic Regional Preserve was one of the first 3 parks created by the East Bay Regional Parks District in 1936. Its feature attraction is Round Top. Round Top is an extinct volcano that erupted 10.2 million years ago. The preserve features several trails, most of which are restricted to hiking and horseback riding. Dr. Aurelia Reinhardt Redwood Regional Park contains the largest remaining natural stand of coast redwood found in the East Bay. Logging to build San Francisco from 1845 to 1860 wiped out the original trees, leaving only their stumps. A second logging occurred after the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. The second growth redwoods, about 50 years old, as well as the stumps from the first generation trees, were logged. The redwoods today are third growth trees, many of which are more than 100 years old. Only one old growth redwood remains in the area, a 93-foot tall tree that seems to grow miraculously out of a rock on a cliff face near Merritt College. Chabot Space and Science Center features interactive exhibits, planetariums, a large screen theater, hands-on activities, and 3 powerful telescopes. The center is the expansion of a public observatory that has served San Francisco Bay Area schools and residents with astronomy and science education programs since 1883. Anthony Chabot Regional Park covers 5,067 acres in the San Leandro Hills adjacent to Oakland, San Leandro, and Castro Valley. Activities include hiking, cycling, and horseback riding. The park terrain is often steep, consisting of grasslands, chaparral, and eucalyptus trees. That's the Clyde Woolridge staging area ahead, which brings us to the end of our cruise down Skyline Boulevard. We'll close out our video with a sunset viewed from Skyline Boulevard in Oakland.
I'd be delighted if you would subscribe to Cruisin' with Papa Steve. If you don't, I'll be just another codger talking to himself on the internet.